Thank you. If there's any questions, fire away.
So, New York will open up the window for child victims to sue.
Right.
What,
August 14th.
what do you have to prove? What evidence do you have to bring?
Well, you're going to have to show in all of these types of cases, generally they're negligence-based cases, so we're going to have to show that the congregation elders, the Watchtower corporate entity, the Christian Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses corporate entity, and the governing body of the organization at the very top, that they were negligent in their policies, in their practices, that they knew, they had reason to know that child abuse existed and was a real problem within their organization. They had no policies for protecting children, and that they knew at some level about the propensities of these particular perpetrators at the time that our clients were sexually molested. And then they covered it up. They ratified it. They ratified this behavior, they allowed it, they covered it up, they accepted it. In other words, if they didn't do anything about it, they essentially accepted it. So that's the kind of stuff we're going to need to prove. I think we're going to be all right.
So you don't need to prove individual molestation in each case. You don't need to prove that the elder necessarily committed the act, or
oh yeah, no, I mean
can you kind of explain?
Well, that's sort of the gravamen of the case is that they were sexually abused by these guys, right? So we're going to have to prove that happened.
How do you do that so many years
because
later?
There's so many people that they're not alone. And Rust has already admitted that he did it. Nicholson has admitted that he did it in these judicial proceedings, judicial committee proceedings. So I think we'll be able to convince that, and I think they're very credible people. So I think any jury's going to believe that this happened to them. So that's sort of the first step. I mean, obviously we have to prove it happened. But beyond that, then we have to prove who's legally responsible for what happened. Of course, the perpetrator's legally responsible, but then these other parties within the Jehovah's Witness organization are legally responsible. The congregation where this happened, the elders of the congregation who knew about both of these guys in advance and knew while it was happening. The people who oversee the congregations, the Watchtower corporate entity, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of New York, the service where the information goes upstream. Everything kind of goes upstream. So when they have these judicial committees, those are documents, and those documents go up to the corporate entity, to what they call the service department of the Jehovah's Witnesses. They're maintained in a database, and the governing body of the organization is informed of everything. They have their own committees. They are a working group. They dictate policies. They have committees that coordinate with what they call the United States branch and branches around the world. So this goes all the way up the chain to the top, and that's why we're suing the top this time around. We haven't done that in our other cases, but we're going to do it here.
Is there a precedent for naming the top religious leaders in clergy abuse cases, period? I mean, has the Pope ever been named?
You know, it's the unique circumstance here is that we have the equivalent of the Pope that's a resident of the United States and operates out of the United States, specifically the state of New York. So they're not a sovereign entity like the Vatican and the Pope, which makes it near impossible to sue the Pope. I know some of us in the past have tried, but it does. This is a different situation. You have a United States domiciled entity, a group of guys that are calling these shots, and I think they're going to be amenable to being sued in these lawsuits here in New York.
Can you talk about where Mike Russ and Don Nicholson are now, and do they still have access to children?
Yeah.
All right, so as far as Mike goes, 3 years when I first got into counseling, because I finally realized I needed to get therapy. we did a Google search, my therapist and I. We found him. He was a youth minister at the Calvary Chapel Boca Raton church. At that point, I wasn't really ready to deal with it. I was still going through my own therapy, and she was like, we gotta do something, we gotta do something. As things started, I learned how through my therapy what needs to happen. I finally got legal representation, and I told them where he was and what he had access to, because he had put himself in position again to be around younger people. He's no longer employed by that church. The church did terminate his position. So I don't know where he's at this moment, but this is within the last month and a half. So as far as I know, he still lives in Boca Raton. As far as I know, he's still unemployed. But, you know, Calvary Chapel got on that and took care of that situation. They probably wanted to get in front of it before, you know, this happened. He's a bad person. In my mind, I'm sure everybody else here would agree with me, he was a very bad person. I did forget to tell you that when I was around 16, he had been accused of this by another boy in the congregation. And that boy happened to be the son of his fiancée. He was 11, if I remember right. Now, he did get on the phone to me, and he did say, you need to keep your mouth quiet. If someone starts asking questions, you gotta stay quiet, because you're gonna get in trouble. He assured me I would get in all this trouble. You know, again, when you can manipulate scriptures the way he knew how to manipulate it, when he knew how to manipulate a person's mind, he had a hold of my mind from the moment I was 14 years old. My therapist said, you know, because I go through this, like, why? Why did I allow it to go on so long? Once you get a hold of a person and you've manipulated them to a point, they're stuck in that spot. And I fear for any of those children he had access to through Calvary Chapel. He was there for 15 years. I'm sure they're going to conduct their own internal investigation to find out if something had happened. But that's the situation of Mike Rust. He is an unemployed priest right now, and that's that.
Don is currently living in New Jersey. He does have advanced prostate cancer, so he's no longer able to have victims, but for many, many years, his wife would even breed puppies so that there'd be families that would come with their kids and stuff, so it never stopped. Even after he got out of prison, I know of other girls and other people that he's been affecting. So even though he did that short time in prison, he's never really paid for it, and he is living quite comfortably in New Jersey. That's it.
Any other questions?
Do you think that this window opening up is a way that, to further the goal that you've had for a long time about exposing this child abuse database? Is there anything about the volume of cases that could come forward that would increase the odds of this database to become public?
Yeah, I'm certainly hoping that the more noise there is about this, and the more victims that come forward, and the more people start demanding that this database be made public, that this information at least be, at the minimum, be provided to law enforcement. I have some of it under court order. I'm subject to a gag order by several courts, so I can't talk about what I've seen in this database, but I'll leave that to your imagination.
I'd just like to add one thing. All of you have been following this story with rabid interest of Jeffrey Epstein, and obviously his suicide was front page news. It's on the news all day today. This is far, far worse. I'm not condoning anything that Epstein did, but that guy used his money and his power to get women to do what they did for him. These people were abused by eminent emissaries of God, of the church. And as both of them talked, as Michael and Heather talked about, there was an element of trust. And these abusers, these rapists, they abuse that sacred trust. And we are going to make them pay for it.
Yeah, can Michael and Heather just talk about what's sort of been the most difficult part about all of this over the last few years and getting to the point where you can stand here?
You want to tackle that?
was married for 20 years. And throughout that 20-year marriage, I was not a good husband. I'll be the first to say it. I had so many demons in my head. That's how it affected my life. I was an angry person. I drank to conceal that anger, or not to conceal it, but I drank to try to make myself feel better, but that only got me angrier. Had 2 beautiful children. I wasn't the best father because of what goes on inside me. It wasn't until I got divorced and got introduced to a new woman in my life, who I'm now married to, a beautiful woman, Tracy, and she got me into therapy. Since that point going forward, being in therapy with Soulville, my therapist, P.D. McGowan, I have learned how to start dealing with this on an adult level. Because in most cases, for anyone who is trying to hide this type of abuse, or who has to try to pretend it never happened and try to get on with life, you can't. You can try, but you're gonna fail if you don't have help. And no one ever got me any help. My wife got me help. As soon as she found out about this, she had me sitting in front of a therapist. And it affects your life in ways you can't even imagine. You say even over the last couple of years, the last few years I've been in therapy, and it took that therapy to get me to this point where I can have legal representation, where I can have a voice, and I can say something finally, and I can get it out there. Hey, this happened to me. It's not right. It's not right. It's never been right. And everyone just wants to turn a blind eye to it. That's how this seems to work. I hate to say that, because like I said, I still profess to be a witness. That being said, this is scary, because I'm just in shock still that this has gone on like this for so many years, and it's still going on. That there are still victims out there. There are still people that are right now currently living through what I went through, which is hell. And again, the voice I'm having here today, the voice Heather has here today, is to bring attention to those victims. We need to find them, we need to get them out there. They need to know they don't need to be scared. Because you can be put, I've been getting texts from my mom and dad all week, this is the wrong thing to do, you can't do this. This is not what you're supposed to do. And those are the people that are supposed to be there to fight for you.
Probably, what's worse is not that they're just victims out there, they're molesters out there. They're still there. They're knocking on your doors. They're standing in the subways. They're in the airports. You don't know who they are because they don't tell you. They don't disclose. They don't warn parents in the congregation that the reason that man was disfellowship or reproof meaning that he's given a little warning and removed from certain privileges, but there's no announcement made as to why he's being reproved. So people don't know. The ordinary congregants don't know. And for all they know, when they send their kids out on what they call field service to go knock on doors with this pioneer, this person who's maybe in charge of that, they don't know if he's a molester or not.
Are all of your cases filed in New York?
No, we have them all over the country, California, Ohio, Vermont, Connecticut, where else? We file a lot around.
Even though the Jehovah's Witnesses are based in New York?
Yeah.
I just want to answer the question.
Yeah. How it's affected.
Actually, I didn't mention before, but Don used to give us alcohol before we go to bed, so that as we got older, I saw him abuse his daughter. We were in the same room a lot of the times, but he would give us orange juice, and it would have vodka in it. So I learned at a really early age that if I didn't want to do something, all I had to do was take a couple shots and go to bed. So I did turn into an alcoholic. I did do drugs. I have PTSD. I've been in and out of psychiatric hospitals probably since I was 20. So it's affected me in a lot of different ways, and it doesn't ever get better because a lot of times you're shut down and you don't get to tell your story. That's part of why I'm here today, so that I can finally say, yes, this is what happened. It was Don Nicholson, and he needs to be publicly known for what he does, and that's about it. Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you. Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
The other side.